pandemic, except for the RDA sessions we had in the November. But I just want to alert that people are mentioned to our core group of Charles River Municipal Stormwater Collaborative folks that we have a larger group today. So we have some people joining us from the Charles River Climate Compact, as well as other people that are interested and have phosphorus limitations and TMDLs to also adhere to, either through lakes and ponds, or maybe are in two watersheds. Like Jason Mamone is here from the town of Dedham, if you want to wave. I believe you're mostly in the Neponset, but you're joining us today to hear about this project. So we'll quickly cover a few things on the agenda and then jump to Julie and CRWA and Kleinfelder's presentation. But I just wanted to let you know that that's why there's a number of new faces on board here. Our typical people that show up, just so others who are new know, Tom Holder usually is one of our members of the Charles River Stormwater Collaborative. George Saraceno from Wellesley, Richard Sweeney from the town of Weston, Dave Hickey from Wellesley, town of Wellesley's town engineer, Catherine Woodbury from the city of Cambridge, Steve Fogg, also from the town of Weston, the town engineer. Stephanie Carlisle is here, but she's, I believe, more of the Climate Compact folks. Nick Christofori is here representing another community, which I don't recall. Matt Schumann from Watertown, town engineer. He's part of our normal group. And we also have a few, and Kate, oh, wonderful, Franklin's here. So sometimes Kate or Brutus from the town of Franklin are joining us. And then we have a few others that are guests here that are either presenting or listening in to help other communities with their phosphorus control planning. So just to get started, I guess you could hit record now. If you want. Oh, you're already recording. Got it. Okay, so the RDA information sessions, they seemed to go pretty well last November. I'd be curious, I haven't heard anything more, and I reached out to Newton Tedder to see if he has any new information to share. I haven't heard back yet. But if anyone did provide comments directly to EPA, if they want to chime in and let our group know, that would be interesting to hear. Okay, so hearing no comments, and I'm assuming everybody knows how to mute and unmute themselves. And I didn't mention at the beginning, but we are recording at the request of some people who weren't able to necessarily make this meeting.
Hey, Maria, it's Zach.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what was was there a deadline for comments on the RDA from communities? Or is there an opportunity to still engage them on the RDA? I forget.
I don't know that, and I specifically asked that in an email to Newton Tedder yesterday. So I will follow up with an email if folks want to know the answer to whether we can still comment.
And any other communities heard or no on that?
Anybody here?
I guess my guess is they probably are going to be open to conversations, but yeah, formal comment period or whatever.
I don't know, but if you hear anything, Zach, please let us know. And I'll let everyone know what I hear back from Newt. The second item on the agenda is the MS4 permit modification. I'm sure you all know that went into effect on January 6th. I can give a brief overview of what I understand the major changes were. There have been webinars that EPA hosted on these over the spring and summer. So hopefully most of this is an overview for folks. I'm just going to hit some of the big highlights. The water quality based section 2 was changed. That was water quality based effluent limitations. And the major change there was that our permit says that we are to ensure it changed from discharges from the permittee small MS4 do not cause or contribute to an exceedance. That was struck out and instead is now meet applicable water quality standards as set forth in different paragraphs below. So that's a major change because, you know, it's a little bit more difficult, I would imagine, legally to prove whether you cause or contribute to an exceedance. And so that's probably why they tightened up that language. So that's a big change. There was some other changes in the construction general permit section 2.35, basically cleaning up and making more clarity in that section, also allowing for us to reference that there is a construction general permit under NIPDES for projects that disturb an acre or more of land, so you can feel free to reference that, you know, existing permitting program in your own construction disturbance ordinance or stormwater general ordinance. I'm sure everybody knows that we got another year, which now is now dwindling down to 5 months left to have in place your post-construction stormwater management ordinance. And they did clean up some language there with the making sure that you adhere to the Massachusetts stormwater standards. So that was helpful to have that clarifying language added. Let's see, section 5, there was some changes that really don't apply to us, that they just included some non-traditional MS4s like the Department of Transportation. Then there was some changes, well, actually, Appendix A, the only notable change I want to mention was that the definition of infeasible was added, and they draw our attention to that, you know, for more like low impact development and trying to encourage that, that it should be at least evaluated unless otherwise infeasible. Another big section change for all of us is in Appendix F. So there's a bunch of changes in there. I'm going to hit just some of the highlights. EPA removed the presumptive IDDE credit for your IDDE program. So for illicit discharge detection and elimination. What that means is that you have to first prove that you are removing sewage from your system, and you don't get the credit until you do that. Which means that all of us saw in our in the table where it says the phosphorus load reductions, everybody sees an increase. So like, for example, in Newton, we had a hard enough target at 50% reduction of phosphorus load. It's now 61%. Another example, Wellesley, you were at 46% phosphorus load reduction, and yours was now increased to 57%. So I would encourage folks to take a look at that table when you're working on your planning, phosphorus control planning. There was an alternative schedule allowed in there, as well as an option for offsite mitigation for phosphorus reduction. So those are some of the just big highlights there. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. And then the next item is the statewide, Massachusetts statewide stormwater coalition meetings. They've been held virtually. So if anybody wants to attend those, this is your perfect opportunity. I would often turn to you know, Wellesley, like George would often go if I can't make it. And sometimes I'd ask Matt Schuman, but anyone could go now. So that next one is February 11th at 1 p.m. Oh, and actually, in fact, Carrie Reed might be joining us soon because she works for the town of Framingham, and they have a phosphorus TMDL for one of their lakes or ponds. So I don't think she's here yet, but I'll give an update on what I know has been happening there. But anyway, definitely just let me know if you want to have more information on that meeting, you know, if you want the Zoom details. So the last meeting of the statewide municipal stormwater coalition was November 12th. And at that meeting, there's always EPA updates and DEP updates. So I'll just run through a couple of the highlights. EPA, so Newton Tedder and Martine Wong reported that They received most annual reports, our year 2 annual reports, from all but 7 communities. So that's good. That number submitted is up from last year. They did mention that some communities reported IDD investigations were impacted due to COVID. I think to some degree they had to have been, because you can't do your building inspections right now. And then he mentioned some things that have already been finalized, like the permit modifications were in the works then. He mentioned the RDA petition was been taking up a lot of their time. Oh, and then also to know that a similar petition has been put forth for by the same people for the Mystic River. And I think one other river too, but I know the Mystic. Julie, do you know if it was 2 rivers?
Yeah, the Neponset.
Okay. So we got company in that wagon.
Good company.
I don't know. Then DEP provided an update. They've been hosting meetings, which I'm sure people probably heard about, advisory committee meetings on the stormwater handbook update. So if you want to know more, you can reach out to me or directly to Laura Schiffman. And then there's a website to go to for updates on that. But they've been having regular meetings on, what runoff standards to use and looking at all of the standards and how to update the Massachusetts Stormwater Handbook. They were targeting it back in November that they would possibly have a public comment period in spring of 2021. So we can keep a lookout for that updated Stormwater Handbook. DEP also mentioned about the Municipal Assistance Grant Program, that they only had 300K available, but we were lucky enough that they did select the Charles River Watershed Association, representing all of us, to help with phosphorus control planning. So that's great news. So same thing with the Think Blue campaign at the statewide level also received some funding. Then there was some discussion that from different other regional coalitions. And I'll just highlight a couple of them that are interesting to me that you may want to learn more about. And when I get the meeting notes, I can forward them. They usually don't come out until right before the next meeting. But the Northern Middlesex Council of Governors, or I think that's what it's called. NCOG is how I always refer. NMCOG. They had received a grant from DEP, and the purpose of that grant was to develop some tools for your ordinance. So if anyone wants information on like some checklists and some interesting stuff, they did a model stormwater bylaw and regulations, and that was all provided through a grant. Also, Neponset has a model bylaw that I guess it's Westwood specifically though, for the town of Westwood. And that was highlighted in Mass DEP's Stormwater News in September of 2020. So those are some good resources that you can look to if you need to still develop your stormwater ordinance. And then, so that you don't hear me talk so much, I asked Catherine Woodbury. Well, actually, does anybody have any comments on the first items that I addressed? So I asked Catherine Woodbury from the city of Cambridge if she might put some of those year 3 permit reminders in our heads. So Catherine, if you are on and ready, you can take over.
Hi, Maria. Hi, everyone. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes.
I am going to try to share a screen. Hopefully this works. Can anybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay. It starts off, this is just some updates in terms of what some of the minimum things we need to do during year 3. I start off though with a disclaimer that it's just a general summary of activities, and it doesn't necessarily include everything that we have to complete within our MS4 permit for this year. I am trying to just highlight some of the ones that are relevant to the Charles River watershed, so that there will be some things that are required as part of TMDLs or impaired water bodies that you may have because you're in a different watershed. So those things I'm not touching upon. But some of the specific things for year 3 we need to do is confirm that our stormwater management plan has been updated or will be to comply with the applicable permit requirements, including our TMDL requirements and impaired water requirements. And as Maria was talking about, our ordinance regulation updates, those are found in section 2.3.6 of the regulations. We have to inspect by the end of this permit year our high priority and low priority outfalls and interconnections. So all of our outfalls have to have that inspection completed for the presence of any dry weather flow. So you have to do your sampling of any dry weather flow that's found, and then we need to complete a re-ranking of our outfalls based on those high and low priority outfalls and interconnections that were investigated. So if you have 50 outfalls and ones that we initially ranked as high priority and low priority outfalls need to have their outfall inspections completed. And then if you find some contaminants that are suggestive of illicit inputs, we need to look at re-ranking those and shift those to higher priority categories. So that's a big one for, I think, many of us, is making sure all of our outfalls have been screened. And then we have to implement, for those of us who had SWIPs that were completed by the end of year 2, SWIPs include a quarterly reporting and inspections and training. So that's something that I'm sure many of us have in our list of things that have to be completed in year 3. The phosphorus control plan specifically for year 3, we have to complete a funding source assessment. And in our annual report, we have to report on our planning and implementation thus far for our phosphorus control plans. So where we're at in terms of our planning efforts. And then some of these general requirements I have listed here, these are all things that were just pulled from the back of the year 2 annual report template that EPA created for us. You know, these are things that we have to be doing as part of our regular MS4 updating. So there's nothing, I don't think there's anything here that is surprising to anybody. It's up, you know, annual training for people in our IDD program, public education and outreach, which has to continue throughout the permit term. Continue our construction inspections. So there's nothing, I don't think, here that's of any news to people. But I just wanted to add, even though we're just talking about year 3, but things that we need to be thinking about because they're coming up in year 4, which is around the corner, is a couple of reports. One is assessing current street design and parking lot guidelines, and other municipal regulations that pertain to the creation of impervious cover, and report our assessing existing local regulations on the feasibility of making certain BMPs for allowable, making sure we don't have anything in regulations that preclude our ability to require the installation or installing things like green roofs and water harvesting systems. We have to have completed or identified 5 permittee owned properties for retrofit possibilities or opportunities. And we need to continue to investigate problem and high priority catchments through our IDDE program. And for our phosphorus TMDL, we have to define our PCP, which I think Julie's going to speak more about, and our baseline phosphorus load and phosphorus reduction requirements. So that's my summary. I hope that was helpful. Any questions?
That was great, Catherine. Thank you so much. I appreciate
A lot of work.
Yes, definitely a lot of work. Maybe we could, if that was like a one-page thing, maybe we could send that to people. That would be helpful.
I'll send this to you, Maria, or your last email, I think, had everybody who is on this. I'll send it out to everybody.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. But please, there is that disclaimer.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure there's something I missed.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah, that it's not comprehensive. It's nice to just have like some tickler reminders of things, but you're right, the year 2 report at the end, they queued us up for everything that they're expecting this year.
Yeah, those things are helpful. Those are the things we anticipate will be of prime concern, I would anticipate, by EPA.
Mhm.
But you never know. It's always something else.
Very true. So I actually forgot, I wanted to mention 2 things. That a couple people retired who were part of our regular group. So Tom Gumbart from Lincoln, he has retired. And I don't know if there is anyone here replacing him from Lincoln. I don't see anyone on here. As well as Steve Casaza, who was the city engineer for Waltham. He retired too. And I didn't introduce someone from Waltham because he's new. So would the new city engineer from Waltham just introduce yourself to our group? Would you unmute yourself and introduce yourself as somebody new?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bob Wynn. I started about 5 months ago in Waltham. I have a background in private industry, really, and private engineering, but so it's first time working for a municipality, but I'm enjoying it so far. A lot of challenges, including all the stormwater stuff, so it will be interesting. So,
Well, welcome, and I'm glad you reached out to join our group or be present in our group. You'll find that we enjoy meeting and bouncing things off of each other, and so I think hopefully you'll stick with us.
yeah, we have a lot of work to do, like everyone's been mentioning, so
Absolutely.
a
Well,
lot of challenges.
that's very true. Well, congratulations on taking the role of the helm of city engineer over there, and welcome.
Thank you.
So I don't know, Julie, I know Betsy, from Kleinfelder, and I don't know the other woman with her. Do you want to introduce the people from Kleinfelder and take over from here?
Yes. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, and I think the timing is good, Maria. So I'm just looking, it's like 1:25 right now. So if we go an hour, then that'll be just 5 minutes for the group to wrap up. Does that work for what you had on the agenda?
Yes, that does. And I just want
Okay.
to acknowledge one thing Steve Fogg mentioned, and I was very pleased but sad for Weston to hear that Michelle Grisenza did accept Tom Gumbart's position, and we'll be going over to Lincoln. And
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, so I was thinking to invite her to this meeting, but I know she's not even formally on Lincoln's payroll yet. But yeah, definitely, Steve, if you want to mention to her, I'm excited for her, and I coordinate with her on a few things, so I'm sure she'd be a welcome addition to this group. But yeah, the timing is fine, Julie. And if we don't get back to like some of the resources and stuff at the end, that's totally fine.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for joining. I'm just going to give a quick background, and then we'll jump into the presentation and introduce our whole team. So folks may remember Well, the DEP MS4 grant program is a somewhat new grant program. Maybe just a handful of years they've been running it. Folks may remember last year, so like 2019, was the first time that the Watershed Collaborative, the municipal stormwater collaborative for the Charles, came together to put in a proposal, and we weren't funded, which was too bad, but we got some feedback. I talked to Laura Schiffman, and basically she said in that previous proposal, we were just trying to do too many things and just focus on one thing, do it well, resubmit, and you'd be a competitive program. So that's what we did this year. We focused on the PCP elements of the MS4 permit and developing a model PCP, and we were successful in getting the grant. And we had a letter of support that Maria drafted as part of the grant application from this group. Also one from Carrie in the Central Stormwater Group, which I think really helped our chances of getting this grant, so that we sort of have this forum to work through and get feedback and input from you all on the project, which is what today is really all about. So Heather, do you want to go ahead and put our presentation up? Okay. All right. And we can probably go to the introduction slides. So I know many of you. I'm Julie Wood. The Deputy Director at Charles River Watershed Association. I do also manage our Climate Compact, which many of you are part of, and I'm the project manager for our action grant to develop the Charles River flood model, which is going on, and many of you see me on Zoom around that project. And then we have our team from Kleinfelder here. Maybe we'll jump to you guys, because I'm actually going to hand it over to Heather to do most of the presentation. So Heather, I'll let you introduce yourself when you take over. But Betsy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Julie. I've met many of you on this call, but I haven't met all of you. We are, Kleinfelder is a engineering consultancy. We're based in Boston, a national firm, but have done work with many of the communities in the Charles River watershed. I'm a principal planner with Kleinfelder, and I've been working primarily on MS4 and stormwater program management for the past couple of decades now as it's gone forward. So we're looking forward to working with CRWA and with all of you, which is the purpose for today's meeting, primarily to hear from you, and looking forward to that. And I'm working with one of my staff members is here today, Stephanie Alamena. Stephanie, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Hi, my name is Stephanie Alamena. I am a water resources engineer with Kleinfelder and have been working with Betsy for the past few years on a bunch of different MS4 projects. So I've been excited to start working on the PCP and work on this template.
So we're both looking forward to hearing from all of you, but we're mostly going to be listening today, so you won't be hearing a whole lot from us.
Great. Yes. We're happy to have Betsy and Stephanie on the team. All right. And then just thanks again to Maria for organizing today's meeting. A lot going on this week with NUIA, busy week. January is just a busy month also, just catching up from December. So really appreciate it. And then with that, I'll hand it over to you, Heather, to do much of the presentation.
Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. My name is Heather Miller. I'm the General Counsel and Policy Director at Charles River Watershed Association. I've met a few of you, but I think I haven't met most of you, so great to meet you. I assumed, as much as anyone could, Margaret Van Duzen's role at CRWA about 1.5 years ago. So working on all things law and policy related for the organization, including MS4 permit implementation and RDA. So look forward to continuing to work with all of you on those issues. So just jumping into a little bit more detail about the project itself. We mentioned already that it's funded by an Mass DEP MS4 assistance grant, and it's going to be completed by June of this year. So January to June, we're already 1 month in, we've got about 5 months to go. So pretty quick timeline, but we think it'll really develop, we'll be able to develop a really great tool for everyone to hopefully utilize going forward. And again, our purpose is to assist all of you in complying with your MS4 permit requirements, specifically the requirements of Appendix F to develop the phosphorus control plan. This chart here on the slide may look familiar to some of you. This is taken directly from Appendix F of the permit, laying out the timeline for PCP development and implementation. And while there's a 20-year overall timeline, there are important milestones to be met along the way, including the first one, which is creation of phase 1 of the PCP, which needs to be completed within the first 5 years. So 2023 is the deadline for that. So lots of work to be done. I think this has already been acknowledged over the next couple of years on that front. And as part of this project, we wanted to try to resolve some questions about PCP format and content by providing that model template for communities to adapt to their own needs as necessary. So our goals and objectives of this project, again, primary goal is to develop that model PCP that can be adopted and customized by communities, not only in the Charles River watershed, but also communities with that are subject to the lake and pond phosphorus TMDL. So along those lines, there will be 2 model PCP templates developed, one specific to the Charles River watershed requirements and one specific to the lake and pond requirements. We are also planning to provide guidance on documenting completed phosphorus reduction actions. Obviously, that's a really important piece of community reporting under the MS4 permit. So making sure that all of those phosphorus reduction activities are being properly documented and that credit is being obtained for them. We are going to be guiding the communities in process and policy changes to effectively document and require phosphorus reduction credits from private landowners and make sure that maintenance is being tracked. This is a challenge we've identified in working with some of the communities in the watershed, making sure that as new projects in town are under review, that there's a process being implemented, not only to implement those phosphorus reduction measures, but also to be tracking them and making sure that appropriate maintenance is taking place. And then we want to prepare communities to implement the requirements in the PCP phase 1 and beyond by providing information on available tracking and planning tools, funding strategies, and areas for regional collaboration. And we'll talk a bit more about that in just a minute. So Julie has some poll questions that she's going to bring up. And I think you can answer them right through Zoom.
All right, yes, here's our first poll. What elements of developing your PCP have you already started? No one wants to vote. Oh, there we go. All right, we got about half of you weighing in. Oh, there we go. Still some votes coming in.
Julie, while you're waiting for the votes to come in, I
Yes.
was going to mention, did we not get, or did you not get the full amount of the grant requested? And so therefore, not only do we have a fast timeline, but we have less money, or you have less money to do what you had intended. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did. That is correct, Maria. We did not get the full amount we asked for. We did scale down one task, which is more on the implementation side of the project. So helping folks basically identify BMP locations or possible BMP locations within their community. That's going to be much less precise than was proposed in the original proposal. But we didn't change anything around the PCP template because we felt like that was just a really valuable piece of the project. And I should say, with the fast timeline, it was so great to have, you know, all the more reason it was so great to have Maria's help in setting this meeting up, and this group already exists for us to be able to kind of slot right in and talk to you guys right at the start of the project. All right, so let's see. All right, can everybody see the results?
Yep, we can see them.
Great. So clear front runner here, calculating reduction credits from current practices and BMPs. A few people into planning and a few people working on the land use change. So that's great. All right, we have a second question for this break. Let's see. Oops, sorry, it's the same one. All right, poll number 2, which best describes your approach to PCP development? This is just sort of looking for the continuum of how much do you plan to do in-house versus have your stormwater consultant or engage a new stormwater consultant to do it for you. All right, great. Oh, cool. Got one more vote this time. Let's see. All right, pretty clear winner there. Most of you are having your stormwater consultant take the lead, and you will provide input and feedback. Great. All right, we will be back with one more poll break later. Thank you, that's helpful.
Okay, so moving on to an overview of the process for how this project is going to play out over the next few months. Our first step is stakeholder engagement, which we are kicking off today through this meeting. And there will be at least one follow-up meeting, possibly more, depending on how it's best to reach folks. But in addition to the meeting today, where we're hoping to get some feedback from all of you, we are going to be sending out a survey to collect written feedback. Some of those questions will get at similar information that we covered today, but some of them will be unique. So if everyone could take a look at that survey when we send it out, or we'll be emailing it out tomorrow as a follow-up to this meeting, that would be great. Anticipate it should take maybe 15-20 minutes to complete. There's a lot of yes, no, multiple choice questions to try to make it pretty easy, similar to the poll questions that you just saw. But that will be really critical in helping inform the process moving forward. So we really appreciate everyone taking the time to fill that out. We're also going to be engaging in some data collection to understand where everyone currently stands on MS4 compliance and what they need going forward. A lot of that information we can access online. A lot of it will come from the annual reports and the stormwater management plans that you all have been working on and submitting. But there may be some information that we request directly from you. One thing I know we will need to request are the legal analyses that have been completed, as well as the funding source assessment, whether it's completed or whether you can just give us an update on your progress on completing that. That would be really helpful. And then we will be conducting several one-on-one interviews, not with every community, just with 3, just to go into a little bit more detail. And we are going to be talking with some Charles River communities and some Lake and Pond communities in order to get different perspectives there. And those will be focusing on accomplishments in terms of reducing phosphorus loading and planning for future actions to achieve load reduction targets. So if you've already signed up to participate in the one-on-one interviews, thank you. I believe we are looking for at least one more community to volunteer. specifically from the lake and pond side of things. So if anyone is interested in volunteering, we would really appreciate it. I mentioned the data collection process. This is just a summary of the types of information we'll be looking for. And I would ask Betsy or Stephanie if either of you could jump in here just to talk a little bit more in detail about the data collection process and how we plan to use the information.
Sure, I'll add a thought or two and then invite Stephanie to also speak to it. You know, some of this information maybe seems a little bit disparate to some of you, and it's not going directly to, you know, quantitative issues. We're trying to do a couple of different things with this product. We want to make it useful to the broadest constituency that we can. So to do so, we sort of need to know kind of what your toolbox is. So we're looking for some trends. We're looking for what you all are currently doing or what tools you're currently using. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We'd rather use the wheels you have now better, more efficiently and more consistently across, you know, across the entire watershed. So some of the information will be helpful to us in terms of the actual template itself, and some of it will be informative regarding how we want to design tools for you on some of the implementation components going forward. So, you know, I think you're going to find some of the data requests we ask for pretty easy. It's going to be things that are at your fingertips. Some of it may require that you do a little bit of hunting around. We hope it wouldn't be too difficult, but it will have some value to us. So we hope you have the time to spend to respond both to the survey and any individual information requests that we make.
Thanks, Betsy. That's really helpful. So in addition to the stakeholder engagement component of the process, we will be working to actually develop the model phosphorus control plan template. Again, as I mentioned, there will be 2 templates developed, one for Charles River communities and one for Lake and Pond communities. And then in terms of implementation, we're going to be making some recommendations and identifying opportunities for things like structural control implementation across the watershed, making some recommendations around funding source assessment, looking at regional trends, options for stormwater management funding sources, including through local stormwater utilities, if you don't already have one in place, and also looking at opportunities for regional collaboration to achieve shared community goals. This is certainly an area where there's a lot of efficiencies to be realized by working together on a regional basis to develop the model PCP and share lessons learned. And as Betsy said, not kind of reinvent the wheel community by community, but make sure everyone is on the same page. So we'll be making some recommendations and identifying opportunities there for how to move forward. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Julie for the discussion and feedback.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Thanks for the intro. And hopefully everyone has a pretty good sense of what we're trying to accomplish in this short 5-month period and how it might be helpful to you. But as we've said, we do really want to stop talking soon so that we can hear from you. So we want to hear about your needs and your challenges. It sounds like a lot of you have started to get your brain around the PCP a little bit, which is great. And then just kind of reiterating what Betsy, what Betsy was presenting when talking about the data, and how our data collection is about taking a holistic approach. We'd love to hear your comments from a holistic perspective today too. So, what, even if a comment maybe doesn't seem like it's directly related to, a PCP deliverable, if there are opportunities or challenges that you have in your stormwater program as a whole, ways that you think maybe things could be more efficient. If you have a great efficiency success story, that's also great for us to hear. So we'd love to hear kind of big picture comments in addition to, you know, any specific feedback you have with related to kind of the nuts and bolts of developing the PCP and tracking the reductions. So one thing, you know, we've worked with a lot of you on, for example, is identifying opportunities where you can get opportunities for phosphorus reduction that also help you meet your other community goals. I'm just thinking, you know, for some of you, we've worked on GI projects around infiltration, you know, infiltration to help with your water supply challenges. And obviously you're going to get phosphorus reduction from that. Or, you know, most of you have your climate plans in place, I think all of you. And so what's the opportunity for overlap there? So our questions are pretty open and, oh no, one more poll. This is to get everybody, get people thinking and ready to participate. Let me switch it to our final poll question. All right, so this is basically your scale of 1 to 5. How well integrated is your stormwater program? All right, great. All right, 16, I think that's the number of responses we've been looking for. Okay, so most of you right in the middle of the road. I guess that's not surprising maybe with a question like this. But a lot of you giving yourselves a 4, still there but room for improvement, or getting there but room for improvement. Great, excellent. Somebody is 5, that's awesome. And a few of us are 2s, works in progress. Great. All right, so that's it for the polls. Now we are going to just look for comments talking. So folks can, please feel free to use the chat. You know, when you record the meeting, you get a chat transcript. So any comments in the chat will be, like, even if we don't see them and respond to them in the meeting, please know they get incorporated into all the meeting materials. But we'd also love to hear from folks too. If you want to use the hand raise feature, I can call on people just to make it easier for people to not feel like they're not sure when to jump in. So these are kind of our big picture questions to start. I was thinking I could go through them, and then Heather, maybe we could stop the screen share and just copy these 4 questions into the chat so people can still see them as we talk.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good.
So looking for your challenges, what you've already identified as your biggest challenge, your biggest unknown. Where does your MS4 complement local planning and visions, and where do you see conflict? If you have some solutions for this, also love to hear them, and probably the group would too. What is your primary challenge for MS4 compliance or challenges? And what phosphorus control measures have you already started to take on? So I think we got some good input on that one on the poll, but if you have additional stuff that we didn't even have as a poll option, it will be great to hear those. Okay. So does anybody want to kick us off? I don't know, maybe challenges is the easiest one to to start off with.
If nobody wants to go, I can share what our challenge is, which
Excellent.
Zach Henderson is already helping us with, Woodard and Curran. But the biggest challenge that I face is seeing, we've had stringent requirements for stormwater management for decades, you know, at least over 20 years. and require infiltration for every kind of redevelopment project, down to the single family home level. And not that we want to take credit for single family homes, but we want to definitely take credit for everything we can from back to 2005 or roughly thereabouts. But figuring out what we can take credit for so that we can have our new baseline is probably our biggest challenge. And we're working on that right now internally. So that I would say is our biggest challenge. And then the timing for, I think there was something about zoning and what was that question? Oh, you have it right there. Okay. Planning, Economic Development, Conservation Commission, and overlapping jurisdictions there. I'm very fortunate in Newton that we have a very strong senior environmental planner. Julie, you know her, Jennifer Steele. And we work hand in hand on all of this stuff related to stormwater. And she is a valuable resource for me, and my conduit to a bunch of people in our planning department. So fortunately, I'm able to work with her very easily, and we have a draft stormwater ordinance that she helped to craft. And it's dovetailing pretty well so far with a zoning reform process that the city's going through anyway. So those are, let's see, the primary challenge for MS4 compliance. Oh, I don't know if I want to say that out loud. Nah, I'll stop there.
Maria, can I ask a question? You made mention that you're working towards doing an inventory or auditing what you can take credit for with respect to reductions. What have you done, or what are you doing, or what are you thinking about doing with respect to the other side of the calculus equation with baselining, which is the manner in which you're gaining IA? How are you doing accounting? How are you capturing where you are creating new IA through new development or redevelopment, or changing the nature of the imperviousness of a site? I'm very interested in that element of it, because that's where the element of overlap with planning. What are you doing to change procedures that are allowing you to capture information now in real time, that you don't have to go back at the end of the year and try to do some sort of an auditing exercise to do?
I guess I would say that only a little bit, in that so there hasn't been a lot of virgin soils or virgin new development. There is one very big one on the Brookline line that I did capture as new development. It was pristine woods, and that is now in like a chart. Like I have a spreadsheet with 2 tabs, where there's been controls of stormwater BMPs and where there's new development. And so we'll just have to go back and track that either through permits or through another mechanism that's been helpful, is that we have a stormwater fee already. And so when people want to get credit for putting in these stormwater BMPs, they request an application and have a credit. And so I've been tracking all of those, plus all the city-owned properties. Because as soon as we put in a pretty hefty stormwater fee, I was directed to make sure any city property that has stormwater BMPs better get a credit. So, and the schools in Newton, the schools have been strategically renovated and or replaced. So at all of the schools and one of our fire departments, they've been strategically putting in stormwater best management practices there. But the main mechanism is either through stuff I know because it's city owned, or if they request a credit on their stormwater fee.
Have you considered something with respect to your site plan review process, in terms of calculating or capturing that at the front end of the project, as opposed to in which case that responsibility then of course resides with maybe a planning partner, as opposed to within your engineering or your DPW hat. And I guess that's one of the things that I'm interested in exploring, as we talk about this template, is what are the things you can capture information as it's happening for the purposes of the reporting, rather than depending on, someone like yourself, were you to move from Newton to Weston, how much institutional knowledge moves with you as opposed to what, has been created in a living document. And it sounds like you're halfway in between with that, but you put some thought into it. So that's helpful.
No,
Thank
it's an excellent point, Betsy. We're not there. I need to hunt this information down, which is far less than ideal right now. So it's definitely something that maybe when our new ordinance gets put into place, that we build in some mechanism through the planning department or through engineering who reviews plans. Well, I'll have to think. It's a good point. Zach, I hope you're listening. Will help us figure that stuff out. Because it's
Yeah, I have to jump off in a couple minutes, Maria, as you know. I just wondered, Betsy and Julie, have you guys, the Great Bay folks, did that nutrient accounting tracking tool? I didn't really follow it much after it got developed, but I just wondered if anybody's reached out to Jamie and the Great Bay folks at DES to see what came out of that, because I think they were headed in that direction. Betsy was kind of a little bit more regional types of tracking interface, but again, it's only as good as how people use it. But because of the Great Bay and stuff, there might be something there that would be worth taking a peek at. And I can't vie for whether any of it's any good, but they started this process. It was more for nitrogen, as you know, but it's, still a nutrient pollutant, and they were looking at kind of regional tracking database kind of thing that could help everybody out. But just a thought.
I appreciate the comment, Zach. I hadn't reached out to them yet, but it's a good idea. I will do so.
Yeah, this is Jay Hersey with the town of Brookline. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, good. We started to do some of that work with our site plans, like going forward, trying to have like on the plan that's approved, a table that shows imperviousness, just to keep a record of it. And we did go back to like 2005. It was such an arduous task of like looking through all the old site plans that had been scanned in to try and come up with some numbers. And it turns out in Brookline, there's not that much change in imperviousness. A lot of the town, especially on the northern end, is pretty well built out. So you can't really change it too much. And with our site plan requirements for like on-site drainage, most people try and make sure they're not increasing the impervious at all, because anytime they do, it just means they have to spend more money on a infiltration system. So I don't know if that information helps.
No, that is, thank you.
Jay, do you have any, not to pick on you since you were willing to speak, but do you have anything to add as far as what your biggest challenges are or your biggest unknowns for Brookline?
It's this PCP program, which I think everyone is concerned about it. Just this template, I think, is going to be great. So I appreciate everyone's efforts trying to pull this together. So just coming up with like a game plan and maybe something that's universal for us all to use, or at least catered for our purposes, is going to be really helpful. Because when we did check the site plans and we tried to throw a number at it, like with the amount of phosphorus that was removed, typically every site plan we have does have some sort of a dry well or infiltration practice, but the amount of phosphorus that is removed is small. It's not even gonna like make a dent in what we are required to remove. So, I mean, the biggest area that I've seen that would help out the most is through our IDDE program. Illicit connections have the most phosphorus in them. And that's always been kind of our main focus here in Brookline, is to try and have a good handle on that and spend, our time and resources trying to get rid of it. And it seems like it can serve both purposes. We're all for the green infrastructure and everything else, but it just seems like the biggest bang for our buck in trying to overcome that phosphorus hurdle is to really make sure we're getting rid of all these illicit connections first. and then, you know, work on some of these other measures second.
Great. Any other folks coming up against challenges that they don't feel like were already specifically voiced? It sounds like record keeping, going back to access old records, just some challenges around process and getting the information streams streamlined is what we've heard so far. Maria,
What
you
was
have
it?
another comment?
Yes, I had a comment. Oh, but I just left my brain. Sorry. Come back to me.
Okay. That was
Can I ask a quick question in the meantime, Julie, just to get back a little bit to the process and tools component, just as out of general interest, can I ask how many of the folks here on the call currently have or are developing any sort of asset management type of program for purposes of your, you know, not just your inventorying of what you have, but, you know, condition and things of that nature? Just out of curiosity, is there people feel like they've got a good handle on that or not? I might put it in the survey questions. Again, okay, thank you, Steve. Just thinking about
Seeing a few shake heads, Betsy.
Yeah.
Seems like a no.
Yeah. Okay, that helps us in terms of thinking about what tools we want to suggest that you might use. We are, you know, hoping to make this plan ultimately the basis for, you know, more of a programmatic approach and not a compliance point by compliance point, you know, look at your MS4 permit. So where we can take advantage of other things that you're doing with respect to your utility management overall, you know, we're not talking about an analogous, you know, SCADA type system. We're not going to be able to have that kind of real-time response to conditions, but the whole purpose of the program, as you know, is iterative and analysis, you know, understanding what's happening and then improving upon it by doing something different, doing the good things well, and the things that aren't working, you know, eliminating them. So we want this plan to be sort of the basis for that program. We don't want it to just be something that you use as your accounting device, hopefully. So we'll see. So to Jay's point about this being, you know, the template being useful to them, we don't want it to become something that you look at and you say to yourself, I don't have any of these tools available to me, so this template doesn't help. So any of this kind of information with respect to what you're currently relying on to do your data accounting and tracking, and the resources you have available to do the inspection and enforcement and things of that nature are important for this, but honestly, to leap ahead a little bit to the question, you know, you had earlier in your agenda about the RDA, if there's going to be an opportunity in the future to be tracking these kinds of reductions or BMPs on private properties more broadly, or required to under the RDA, then you already have something in place. You'd have a means of taking best advantage of that. You know, it's not unlike what you're required to do under the PCP. It just now becomes a little bit more broadly useful to you. So we are thinking about it in that future iteration as well, and hoping that it will have some value for you there. So thank you.
Thank you. I remembered what I was going to say. A challenge for us in Newton is, and thank you, Betsy, because you reminded me, is colleges and universities and golf courses. And we have massive parcels of land or campuses, basically, that we really, in some cases, have no idea what's going on, you know, at like BC or, you know, now the UMass College, but it used to be Mount Ida, that whole campus there. And they're almost their own entities. And one positive thing that could come out of the RDA is that if they have their own permit and then our numbers get reduced, that would be a big, help for us. Because it just feels like it's too big of an entity for us to wrap our hands around all of our assets, private, and then all of these campuses, these large campuses.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yes, presumably the RDA would help with that. Just jumping back to our questions, this is another one Jay got into a little bit. I think the question here, where does MS4 complement local planning and divisions, and where do you feel it conflicts? I mean, Jay, you were referencing like your IDDE work and how there's some complement there. Sounds like maybe not as much as you'd even like, but some complement there. So anyway, do other folks have more comments on that as far as when you're, when you do get into the more planning part of the PCP, based on the poll, it sounds like at least a few of you are into. What are you looking at as far as other town departments, other towns reports? Who are you talking to? Or not, I guess, also.
Anybody?
Thank
Some
you,
of them-
Ruchika.
Ruchika.
Betsy, nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
You too. Yeah, I can speak a little bit about Somerville because there are so many departments and a lot of the work that happens related to green infrastructure doesn't necessarily sit with the MS4 piece, right? So there's a lot of infrastructure work that's been planned already that doesn't think about, well, are we thinking 5 years into the future, 10 years into the future? Is this meeting our phosphorus requirements, right? Or the designs are already so far advanced that you can't just go back and change them now to think about this phosphorus reduction. So honestly, I think the conversations should have happened, right, 3 years ago when the permit was on the horizon, but it wasn't. So it's the challenge, at least for me, is how to bring everybody together and think about these things and make sure that whatever we're installing now is reducing phosphorus for the future, right? I mean, and especially in Somerville, where you have almost zero place underground to put anything new, it's almost like a lost opportunity. So.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we've heard echoed from others, that stuff that maybe got approved last year, it was in the planning for, the planning for it started 3 years ago, and this just wasn't, this just wasn't. And I mean, I think from our perspective, we also see, private developments coming through, and it's kind of the same thing, and they're just not yet in the mindset of, they're not aware of the calculations, or not in the mindset of doing the calculations. Even some confusion, we've had interface directly with either design teams or development teams, and found that confusion is there. Yeah, I think that can be frustrating. I guess maybe in the example of Somerville too, where there's been some major infrastructure projects that sort of like just missed the timeline. Yeah.
And the question is that maybe we are doing enough already, but we don't know, right? There's no, I see Dave shaking, we're definitely not doing enough. I mean, I don't know, unless we put those numbers.
You can't do enough.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be nice to look to to kind of work backwards, right? This is my target. How do I get there and have those numbers? Have that plan with numbers. And I think the way the PCP plan is set up in the phases, it's nice, but it's also, to me, it doesn't make sense, right? You're asked to look at funding before you know what you're gonna implement. So I wish I had the whole picture up front, so then it's like, am I making good enough progress? So.
And I'd ask the question of you, or for all of you. One of the things you just touched on, Luchiko, has to do with whether or not people in town hall or city hall are talking to each other around mutual goals. So we had something at the beginning of this discussion around, are there ways to complement the broader vision of other of the departments? So for instance, in a couple of communities that I've worked in, some of the opportunities have really stemmed from open space planning or parks and recreation people who really don't necessarily, think about the pollutant reduction per se, but they may be thinking about social equity issues. So they may be thinking about what other elements of stormwater management make a difference for the planning here, and do you have a means to get involved or engaged in that conversation at the right time, or are you invited into that conversation because they know you're the resource that can give them that answer? So part of, and that gets to the question that I had asked Maria as well. It's is there ongoing dialogue in your town halls about your mutual missions, with respect to the quality of life in your community that happen in this case to equate to a reduction in phosphorus load. But it's not exclusive to that. So I don't, we're not promising. I don't want to overpromise, and I'm not trying to be, too overly optimistic. But I do think there's ways that what we can embed in the plan encourages that kind of dialogue at the time, as you mentioned, that it makes a difference before things get beyond conceptual design.
So one thing I did to help try to coordinate better internally within our city hall is I drafted a phosphorus reduction policy that our city engineer could utilize for all city projects. That basically would say that, like, for any project that we're undertaking, that we, I listed the 12 different mechanisms from the Appendix F of the phosphorus control planning section, and said that every single project should be evaluating these 12 methods, and write a memo saying what are you getting from this project, because it's a city-led project, and then if you can't get 50% reduction, why? And I wanted to do that to start having that backup of, we have an insane goal of 4,279 pounds of phosphorus to remove. And that was before our numbers just changed with this new permit modification. So I need to be able to, start building the foundation. And so that was one idea that I had. And it seems to be helping. I'm not sure if they're totally, because of the pandemic, implementing the memo. But we do have a big project of our main library, and they just brought myself and the conservation agent in for suggestions on phosphorus control planning as part of a solar canopy project. So it's slowly trickling in, like anything in municipal government. I think if the leaders know, like our commissioner knows in public works, people important, in planning, then it starts infiltrating through to other divisions. Would love to hear from anybody else.
That sounds like a great tool, Maria.
Thank you.
Yeah, does anybody else have comments on how that's working across, either across department or across program or across community goal? I think like Betsy gave a good example of interfacing with parks. How's that going? Obviously interfacing with planning, it sounds like some of that's already started. But other comments on that, or interfacing with the universities too that Maria brought up. Not to put Catherine on the spot, but I think Cambridge does have some tools they use for that, or universities, hospitals, whatever, your big institutional landowners.
Hi, Julie. I'm not sure what tools you're thinking of. I mean, we meet with our universities often in terms of what their plans are. And I think what Maria was getting at in terms of this whole RDA, is that going to be able to be a tool to help us reduce phosphorus from their campuses without requiring them to do the city encouraging them to do more on their own private property? They're going to have to because of the RDA. Very interested to see how that works out. Were you specifically thinking of a tool?
No, just meetings, I guess, or open lines of communication. It just seems that you interface or have had some success with interfacing directly with the communities. Directly with the universities.
Yeah, they act sort of like a municipality themselves because they're such large landowners. They have capital plans that go out many years, and so they meet with us to understand what some of the requirements will be. And they take a planning approach like municipalities have to in terms of how their land area is going to build out. So we're able to interface with them, and there's a number of goals beyond stormwater management that need to be addressed on the campuses. So there is a good town gown type of relationship that goes on. I'm sure Waltham and Newton and other towns that have large institutions like universities have that same type of relationship. But some of our challenges are a little unique because we're also a CSO community. I know Somerville is also dealing with that. So it's there's some challenges that we're facing in terms of the phosphorus control plan that are unique to the ability to do sewer separation in areas that are considered combined or that are combined. So it's a new discharge, it's a higher load of phosphorus is that goal. Almost a negative goal in terms of, now you have all this phosphorus that's being introduced to the water body that wasn't there before. So it increases our phosphorus load calculations, which we already have a sizable amount of phosphorus that we have to reduce. I think Jay was talking earlier about you're taking all the credit now for illicit discharge reductions. It's, I think the new or the modifications to the permit has now allowed that, and that's why all of the loading has gone up for many communities. You can start calculating them and taking credit for that. I think some of the bigger challenges are doing the maintenance inspections require that once you've got a project that has implemented certain infiltration practices or systems to reduce phosphorus loading, there's the requirement that in order to take credit for it, you have to certify that it's been maintained on an annual basis. And so we're trying to work through self-certification processes and getting our inspectors out to do post-construction inspections. So I don't know if I went too far off topic, but I think in terms of the universities, it's just making sure you have a good working relationship and planning. They know what to expect. They're too big to think they're going to get away with anything by not following current regulations.
Can I add something to something that Catherine said about the inspection and O&M of these structures? I had a conversation with New Tedder around Christmas time, talking about the certification process, but also something he said, and I don't know if anybody or everybody's aware, it's, the certification we send saying, hey, all these BMPs and stormwater treatment structures are being maintained and operated, and we sign off on it, and we include that with our annual reports. But he did point out that they will audit to see the logs. So just putting it out there, if you start taking credit for these, make sure you keep the logs and make sure you have the logs. Something to be aware.
And I think that gets to some of the work that you're trying to do in terms of the tracking mechanisms for the phosphorus control plan. There's so many different ways you can track this, right? And if there's a simple way that everyone's following, maybe that's acceptable to EPA. And so are you working with EPA? Are their eyes on some of the products that you're coming up with, or some of the tools that just to make sure it covers everything that they're anticipating or expecting in the work that you're doing, Julie?
Yes, yes, we will run everything by Newt specifically. Which may actually be a good segue for us to move to our wrap-up slide. So everything everyone shared, really appreciate. I think we got some really good big picture info. One area that ties to what a bunch of you mentioned is data compilation and record keeping. So we didn't really talk too much about that today, but there are a lot of questions in this follow-up survey that are more detailed and specific about that type of topic. What type of tools are people already using? Specifically EPA, our EPA region has developed the BAT and the OPTI tools for nutrient reduction tracking. And so you'll see those referenced in the survey. And so that is our primary next step, is to continue the information solicitation via the survey. And that's just a simple Google form. As Heather said, it really probably should take only 15 minutes. And we are hoping that everyone will get a chance to respond to that. We don't want to develop a template that's not useful to you. That would be a waste of everyone's time. So really appreciate you filling that out. Hopefully by the end of next week, we can get everybody's answers. And then in the email, we'll also reiterate this, but we would love to get copies of your PCP legal analysis. And if you have anything to share thus far on your funding source assessment. So the comment came up that the order doesn't quite make sense to everyone. And I know we've heard that from folks before, that the way EPA phased this might be a little bit counterintuitive. But it is the world we live in and the world we work in. So we would love to see what you have for those two milestones so far, so that we can build off of them for this template. And then any additional data requests, you may hear from us directly. If we can't find something easily on your website or just have questions, we will reach out to you specifically. And then as Heather mentioned, we are conducting the 3 one-on-one interviews where we'll get a little bit more in depth with the questions, hopefully get some additional feedback or confirmation. I'm sure there'll be overlap with some of what we heard today. And then our next meeting will be April, May timeframe, and there we will discuss the draft templates. And we will coordinate with Newt. I can invite Newt to come to that meeting too. We can actually have him there, so that he's part of the conversation. But yes, obviously we will, make sure that what we put out as a template does meet EPA's expectations and needs for the PCP. And then all of our final products will be at the end of the June. It really is a sprint. I mean, the timeline is familiar to all of you with state grants and your own fiscal year, your own fiscal year constraints. So we are so happy to have so many of you join us today. Happy to see more feedback in the survey. And look forward to getting you something useful at the end of the day, at the end of the project.
Thank you, Julie, Betsy, and Stephanie from Kleinfelder. I'm sure we're all look forward to this product being developed. One thing I was going to say is that since we're all on, as like Betsy's comment about this model being to serve the broadest audience made a lot of sense to me, because not everyone's going to have the resources of, us in Newton or Cambridge or other communities. So it is nice that you're thinking broadly, so that all communities who might not have as much resources available to them can still utilize it. And then I just want to make sure people saw the last bit on the agenda was resources. Conferences are, not as well attended right now because they're virtual. Some of them aren't, or some people maybe are skeptical. I just want to put a plug in for the NUIA annual conference going on. Just yesterday, Mass DEP's stormwater coordinator, Laura Schiffman, who gave us this grant that we've been talking about, did a session yesterday at the NUIA conference. And there are 2 more days of stormwater stuff, one on February 2nd, and then the Stormy Awards on February 4th. And so just putting a plug in there for people to consider going for, even just a day. It used to be a conference that many of us would look forward to seeing each other in person on, and unfortunately, we have to do it all virtually right now, but it's still pretty good. So something to consider. Also, the MVP program's been having a couple of cool webinars. They had one last week on their toolkit. And, I know that, we had that just as a tickler message about the climate compact, and that there's, another grant that CRWA is working on for building resiliency across the Charles. But anyway, they had a great session until they got Zoom bombed last week. I don't know if anybody was on that, but it was very interesting to hear what other communities are using MVP grants for, and to learn some basics about the MVP toolkit. So I put that link there. And then there's the usual links that I think most of you are familiar with, the EPA stormwater tools, as well as the EPA Soak Up the Rain. Does anyone have any other resources they might want to mention before we close? Oh, actually, I want to mention that since Carrie Reed is here, I hope I don't embarrass you, Carrie, but Carrie got the Youth Educator of the Year award yesterday at NUIA. Congratulations to Carrie. So a lot of fun stuff does happen, even though it's remote. Anybody, any other comment or any comments from anybody? Any final?
Maria, just one thing to mention on the MVP. Did folks see that they're doing a, like basically an opportunity for you to put in a expression of interest, I think they're calling it. And that's open basically now for another month. I think this is in response, the MVP Action Grant application is fairly onerous, as most of us know, and it's also become a very competitive grant program. So I think in response to that, MVP has offered this. It's an optional step, but they said they are encouraging it. So if people have ideas for what you're thinking you might apply for your I guess it would be what the FY22 round of action grants, you can fill out a form right now and MVP will look at your project ideas.
Great. And I did notice at the very top of the chat that Stephanie Carlisle of Medway, I'm not sure if she's still here. Yes, she is. She mentioned that Medway did put in a formal letter in December regarding the RDA. And I will, if I hear more, if it's still possible, I would still do it if you're interested as your own municipality. But if I hear that, no, they're not accepting more comments, or if they are, I'll let y'all know.
Yeah, I think in that regard, Maria, I think they are starting to look at, the drafting the permit at this point. But in any event, there'll always be a public comment period when that draft, getting ahead of the draft is always useful, but there's always going to be another public comment period on the actual draft permit itself when that's ultimately put out for publication.
Okay.
So people should keep thinking about it.
Very good point. All right, well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Julie, so much for all
Thank
this.
you guys.
And for,
This is really helpful. Thank you very much.
you're welcome. Thanks for letting us use your Zoom account.
Oh yeah, thanks for organizing, Maria. No, anytime on the Zoom.
Have a great
All right.
rest of your day, everyone.
Bye all.
Yep. Bye.